by one whole minute. If there's one thing I'm consistent with, it's being inconsistent. It's Sunday night right now. I'm going to take a moment before I really delve into this because making a live cast is a little bit awkward. I don't plan them far enough ahead. Tonight wasn't going to do one. I was feeling a little bit burnout, and my wife said you should, and so I thought about it. And I was like, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. I don't know. Anyway, so I decided to have a little discussion about a lot of different bullshit tonight. And so, like I said, I'm going to wait for a couple minutes and see who joins because I don't want to really start over. Even though I don't think there's really any way to start over when I don't have a very specific itinerary of things that I really want to talk about. In the back of my mind, I always have a lot of thoughts ruminating around. I think most of us do. I know some people. It's hard for folks to understand what goes through other people's minds. It's impossible. In fact, there's a word for it. Can't recall what it is, but it is that epiphany that you can never ever see through another person's eyes. Therefore, each of our situations are extremely unique. And I feel like we kind of forget this. We believe in a one size fits all, which comes down to everything: attitude, behavior, the old cookie cutter mentality that all the houses on the block have to fit the HOA. It's just a metaphor for such a larger conglomerate of bullshit that we consistently have to immerse ourselves in. And when I say bullshit, I mean it's bullshit. From the time I was a young kid, I have been a rule breaker. I've been the kind of person, I was thinking this earlier. I was putting some stuff away and I found a couple of my skateboards. I still have them and I still skate. My youngest kid skateboards. And we used to go down to skate parks and, build quarter pipes and do all the things that skaters do. But included with that, being a skater meant you learn to tell a lot of people to fuck right off. And I'm not the kind of person who just tells people off for no reason. I'm the kind of person who is very anti-authoritarian if a person is rude about it. In other words, if we're skating around somebody's private business and they come out and they said, "Hey kid, you guys, can you please maybe skate somewhere else? It's scaring the customers," or "I don't want you to get hurt," whatever it might be. But no, it was the guy coming screaming out there. He's going to call the cops, and instantly you build a resistance to the person because they're being rude right off the bat. That might be because that's what they're used to. And if you look at the behavior of on the internet today, for example, it's very similar to that same mentality of just instantly assuming that everybody's out to get you. Constant argument. But that's another topic altogether. Or maybe not. But I was thinking earlier about empowerment, as I said. It's kind of a kind of a joke of a word. Um, Empowerment is not about recognizing your victimhood, which is kind of another part of the discussion I want to have. It seems that in the last, couple decades, a lot of what people consider empowerment is really acknowledging that somehow you've been marginalized or sidelined. And I talked about this earlier in a video. I haven't uploaded it yet, but it's one of those weird topics when you talk about things like assumed racism or people's intentions, like a school in New York where all these parents and kids flipped out because the first day of Black History Month they had a meal that was chicken and waffles and on the side they had watermelon. And I remember hearing these two parents say, they're talking about how, oh, my daughter just felt horrible. It was so bad for her to be at school and see this. And I'm like, okay. And then she says, the chicken and waffles is fine, But the fact that the watermelon was there is what, I mean, just a little bit too far, right? And the assumption is what you're saying, that the school district purposefully got Aramark, the company, they decided to make this just to poke fun at race. People do their best. People have good intentions at heart. Just because people might not understand fully what you consider to be culture, whoever you might be, doesn't mean people don't make an effort or try. And I feel like today, even if people make an effort, it's like not good enough. That it's a constant battle to tell others, no, you're wrong, you can't use this term. This became quite more prominent. Uh, I remember several years back when there was a major hubbub about wearing Native American headdresses, or sorry, Indian headdresses. See, I caught myself just doing it, self censoring by saying Native American, whereas even the Bureau of Indian Affairs uses that term. Many people who are natives to this country use the term Indian, and it's just as often white people who think it's a derogatory term when it's not. And I bring this up because it's important. These are these little cultural issues that people are offended on behalf of other people. And it makes it really difficult to have a normal conversation about reality. This debate I got into with somebody years ago about this topic with the Indian thing, which is why I brought it up. And they got so pissed off at me for using that term. I said, do you even understand that you can accuse people of being hateful or racist, but really what's behind everything is intention? Everything. I mean, the number one factor we should be looking at when we have a discussion beyond the topic itself is intention, the intention of the other person. I just want to flip through and say hi to everybody. Hello, my friend. Hello, Biff. Hello, Alom. Hello, Ryan. Um, where else we got? Eric. Good to see you, my friend. You used to skate too, huh? You were a rule follower, huh, jackass? Salutations to you too. Hello, Logic. Good to see you, my friend. A Christian advertisement before you got to the video? That's great. That's funny. I didn't know there would be an ad. I guess that's because I put on the. If you want to put on the optional donation thing, then you get like it automatically puts ads. I always wondered why they did that. But hello, Ryan. Good to see you, my friend. Alum. Yes, correct. Yes, Indian is only a derogatory term from white mouths, and that's yeah. Thanks for reminding me. Getting back on track here. So at Burning Man, there was a major issue with people wearing Indian headdresses. Now I can understand if somebody's wearing a traditional, a real one, or maybe a specific warrior or tribe's headdress. But just wearing a headdress itself became such an issue that people would just like degrade and say horrible things to people who would dare dress like somebody else. If I were to dress up in blackface, we all know how that would go over. But that wasn't something that was always considered offensive. It's one of those things that could be offensive, and that now we take it as offensive, but it wasn't always. I'll never forget hearing a story about this little kid who dressed up in blackface to celebrate Martin Luther King. And he was a white kid, and it did not go over well. And it was so sad because he's like, he doesn't know any better. He doesn't know there's anything wrong with that. But, I think these are important topics right now. And it's because I feel like humans are all trying to find their place, find their purpose, figure out who we are, right? As individuals. And often that's a lot harder than it sounds. So instead of finding ourselves and finding our individuality, or let me just reiterate that, cultivating our personality and our, selves, because it's not something that you just find. That's a kind of this illusion that you just discover who you are one day. At least in my experience, you'll find little moments where you'll be extremely motivated or feel really good about something, or you'll think this is the direction to take. It's kind of like the day you finally quit smoking, or discover some new place or move somewhere else. Like it's exciting for a while, and then novelty wears off because you're always back to life at some point, and that's not a bad thing. It's baseline. We're always moving towards baseline. So I feel like we've always had a lot of conflicts in our past, and we've always had to deal with things like in past centuries, like uh, starvation, um, major infant mortality, horrible infant mortality rates, even up into the last century, and that's kind of returning today. But we've come a long way, and we've developed, basically created an environment where we can be lazy as fuck a lot of the time, and that's made us, I guess, more passive. And because of that, a lot of that passivity doesn't allow us to really take time to think about life and what we need in life, or to ponder other people and their intentions or needs. And we're just kind of stuck in our own reality, fighting in our bubbles. You know what I mean? We're always fighting in our bubbles. When you start to understand that there's not a lot to understand, when you start to find yourself coming full circle in your journey of life and your searches, if I was 80 years old saying this, a lot more people would believe, like, what I have to say wisdom wise, because with age comes wisdom. We know that inherently, even if we don't always really consciously aren't aware of it. I mean, not everyone who's old is wise, but philosophical lectures coming off the tips of a 75-year-old man is going to sound a lot more convincing than some 16-year-old high school student, right? Because the kid hasn't lived it. He can read it. Just like you can go through college and you can take philosophy courses, but that's not philosophy. It's an interesting, I don't know if I would what I would call it exactly, but the idea of studying other philosophers only goes so far, or taking courses on different theories, when in fact you should be drawing on just the basic, yellow book, basic definition, the summary of all these different philosophers, and then be able to come up with your own idea of what life is about. And it doesn't have to be 100% correct. You just have to piece together some sort of a framework in your mind that works and that's conducive to your lifestyle, the family, or being single, or living in the city, living in the country, whatever it might take. But most of all, to not be blaming the rest of society for our failures. We can talk about systemic racism or judgment or the hateful people out there, but you can't blame society for where you are at. And that's what we've been doing for a while now. And I've caught myself even doing it. Sure, well, who cares? I'm a white male, right? My arguments don't matter. I mean, to some extent, that's kind of, nobody wants to hear anybody groveling unless they have some sort of a victim status that they can play on. This is just true. I've seen it. It's too clear right now to ignore. But not everyone plays that game. There's just a few who do, a very vocal minority who want to make everybody else feel bad about who they are. Kind of a reverse discrimination, as I mentioned last time. And I just don't buy into it. I don't spend time stewing in what other people are angry about, or saying, how dare they feel that way about me, because that's no better than the way that they assume that I feel about them. You see, this circle just never ends until somebody just shuts the door and says, I don't care. I really don't care. When I encounter a human being, all that matters to me is who are they, behavior wise, right? And what kind of a person are they? You know, how do they conduct themselves? What is the cadence of their voice, and how do they sound? How does it feel to be around that person, right? So if a person is, if two people don't get along because they're completely different, I don't think it's right for somebody to assume that the other person doesn't like them because they're, a bigot of some sort. This is what I've seen on a larger scale in society right now. Everything has to be all inclusive, and we have to be completely, fair to every single person. It started with participation trophies. You don't want the kids to get offended. You don't want the kids to feel like they lost a game. It's kind of like, is that harsh? Am I a dick for thinking that? How ridiculous it is that it's almost like I'm, I guess, promoting tough love in a way. And I am. Because I've seen that humans are weak. We are weak-minded. We will fall back into chaos if we don't push ourselves. So if we just allow people to push society around based on their own whims without countering that with some sort of a rational argument, then we're just hiding and, allowing the world to be morphed to somebody else's wishes, whatever it may be, whoever they may be. I mean, that's how the Nazis took over, right? Some people who might have wanted to speak up, and I hate to use that analogy, but it's the first one that came to mind. I mean, the way that a lot of cultures have minded their own business and lived peacefully, and then somebody has to come in and stir up the pot, right? Somebody always has a problem, and there's always somebody to complain about something. So what do we do about it? We ignore it. That's what I'm getting at. But we also have to fight against it. It's a conundrum, my friends. It really is. How much do you step into the game? Not you personally, but how much should we as individuals get involved? Like with politics. I've wrestled for years about voting. A lot of people have made up their mind long time ago. Oh, I always vote or I never vote. For me, it's been back and forth. Yeah, I'll vote. No, I'm not voting anymore. No, this makes no sense. Oh, I've got to vote for local issues. Oh, but I'm not voting for president. Oh, but somebody has to, or else somebody else will win. Yada, yada, yada. Does it even matter? Are they both on the same side? How much propaganda are we being fed by people who have financial interests at stake, right? People who want to get you to listen to them. It's like clickbait. If I wanted to make this the title of this, a balloon landed on my house with Chinese writing on it, just as a joke. You know, something. But it's hard because even though people would know it's a joke, others might not. And it's like I do not believe in clickbait and bullshit. That's bad enough. But when you're not doing nothing more than stewing in negative stories and presenting shitball media, guys like Tim Pool, right? This guy who can't make up his mind what the fuck he thinks. And every time I'll be flipping through, and in my home and suggestions list, there'll be something ridiculous. It's like him talking about what some other person said. It reminds me of that old small minds talk about people. I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt. Great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, and simple minds discuss people. And it's not that everyone who's talking about people has a simple mind, because there are a lot of very intelligent presenters. It's that they're catering to an audience who have simple minds. And that doesn't mean that they're dumb. That means that they're simple-minded. And at that point in their life, they're focused on other people. They're focused on he said, she said. Just think about it. Every 4 fucking years, it's what this president did. It was like last president. Everybody's like, well, he's the president now. You should just respect him because he's the commander in chief. So respect him. And then the minute Biden's in office, oh, fuck that guy. It's just the same bullshit in and out. And everyone just fucking goes along with it. And I've realized something that I guess I didn't know, because none of us really can know the full picture of how people behave under pressure until we see it happen. We know that people do stupid things, but I would have almost rather see chaos and more, a lot more chaos in the streets during COVID. Even though people were complaining about the riots, it's almost like the direct opposite was even worse. People who were willing to lock themselves in their house for weeks or months on end, afraid to go see anybody, not able to see their grandmother in the hospital as she's dying, all because of a government's choice to keep us away from something that probably wasn't even harmful to us, to most of us. And how people just believe what they're told about everything. It's kind of sad. And then you get to the point where you realize when you're dismissing things like that, when I'm dismissing things like that, I realize a lot of people don't feel the way I feel. They feel the opposite. The guys like me that didn't get a shot, for example, were the most selfish people. Like, you're not protecting the others, you're not doing the right thing. And I just chose to do what I did because I have my own reasons. And that comes down to cultivating my own individuality and personality that allows me to make my own decisions based on what I need and what I think is important. And I don't mean what I need selfishly. I mean what's going to be best for my family, my environment, because ultimately, as a human being, you come first. So, secondary to your family. As far as if you can't feed your family, of course you would die to protect your family, I would hope. But I'm saying if you're not fed and taken care of, and you can't protect others, and so you always have to look out for number one, but your family, your friends, your friend groups, your communities, your local area, but that's extended into nationalism, and it gets very messy up on a macro scale. Complicated shit. It always is. Indians are from India, says Biff. That's true, but we use that term here, absolutely. Uh, Logic. Intention, I think, is important, but there's courtesy and respectfulness. I actually agree we should not appropriate garments or clothing outside of our own culture. Well, I would ask you this. Isn't everything you're wearing appropriated from somebody else who made it? I mean, if you've ever worn a flannel shirt, I would ask you if you're aware that somebody made that pattern. Have you ever worn a tartan shirt or a certain pattern of a flannel shirt? If so, then that's from my ancestors in Scotland. You see what I mean? I have actually seen people wearing garments that obviously aren't Scottish, and they're wearing the tartan that would be from my clan, the Campbell clan or the Orr clan. I don't care. The way I see it is everything we eat, if you didn't want to culturally appropriate, then you wouldn't even eat a taco. You wouldn't eat any Chinese food. You would basically just be a really boring, dry person. Cultural appropriation to me is complete bullshit, and I definitely don't buy into it. I think white guys should have dreadlocks, and anybody who has a problem with, just fuck off. That comes down to individuality and the strength to do it, and a lot of guys know that, and that's why they have dreadlocks and don't care. And hey, I respect them for it because nobody owns culture. Culture is something we all share. It's like saying we shouldn't have jazz because black people played it, or because I believe that's part playing into the sensitivity part. At least that's my explanation. So I respect your opinion, but I don't agree with you. Yep, Alum nailed it. Without appropriation, we would have nothing. Exactly. Thank you. Art, everything. Yep, he's correct, man. He really is. Jackass says, I'm wondering if your construction company ever does out-of-state work. I've been thinking about a project. Want to give a job to somebody I like. Oh, Minnesota? Fuck. No, I mean, it's just me and one other guy, and it's his company right now. But if I ever travel out to Minnesota, I'll look you up. Yeah, yeah. Logic, you've got to look at this logically. You say you're logical, so you've got to understand that the cultural appropriation thing is bullshit. That nobody owns culture. Culture, it's all about intention. It goes back to the intention. Do you intend to be rude? Are you dressing up to insult someone or to pay homage to them? So that's how I feel anyway. But like I said, people wear flannel shirts and various patterns that came from other cultures. I've seen people walking around with handkerchiefs that have paisley on them, and that's from the Middle East. It's like, you can't get away from it. So it's really complicated. Well, see, Logic, when you said that's a justification, we're talking about courtesy. But courtesy to who? Because if you talk to a lot of cultures, they don't mind. A lot of people within those cultures don't mind if you actually talk to those people, then most of them don't care. They say, cool, do what you want. A lot of them say they're honored that people would want to have the same clothes or dress like them. There's only a small vocal minority on the internet that screams everybody's a racist. And those are the ones that people are getting tired of hearing. So, I hope you know that. Keith, hey Carpo, nice to see you. It's good to see you too. I'm going to read this through. Carpo, philosophy, they share their perspectives. All leads towards insight and growth. Absolutely. Absolutely. One perspective 8 billion times over. Jackass says, I blame myself for my travails. I built a prison for myself. I can't escape. No, you can't escape, but I know those prisons can be tough because we put it in brick by brick. You got to break down that wall. And it's important because we find out often the prison we have, let me think of a good metaphor. Maybe it's just, maybe it's built on ice. Maybe we can, climb right under and out the other side. Maybe it's not, maybe it's somebody else that put the prison on us. You see what I mean? Some people feel imprisoned because of who they're with or their circumstance, their job. There's a lot of reasons, I think, why people do. Meaning. Eric says, I've voted in everything I could and haven't been impressed. Oh, I hear that, bro. Okay, I gotta flip. I guess I didn't catch up. I gotta catch up. The prison, it's horrible. Logic, are you arguing with Al? Yeah. Yeah, low limits. Can you talk about we getting old? Yeah, I'll talk about that in a minute. Let me just catch up on these comments. Very true. Japan loves the attention and appreciate anyone who wears or indulges in their culture. I think we need to talk about this. And between Logic and Alum, hey, let's put it this way. Both of you have your own opinions, okay, on this topic. I'm going to say that I tend to agree with Al on this one. That I've never really understood how people can tell others what they should or should not wear, what they should or should not put on their body, or earrings. You can imagine nose rings could be considered cultural appropriation. And I'm guarantee you, Logic, that there's something in your home right now, a blanket, maybe a woven Mexican blanket or something that was from another culture. And I guarantee you that you've worn some clothing that was invented in another country, that was from a culture that's not your own. You know why? Because the sad thing is, unless you wear just blue jeans and a white t-shirt all the time, I mean, that's American culture right there. Pretty much everything we got is from someone else. And I've thought about this deeply, and I definitely stand by it. Because you'd have to point me to the people who are actually offended. And when I went looking, I couldn't find any. I could only find a small echo chamber online of people who have convinced others that they're really offended that everyone's racist. I mean, think about it this way. There's an entire community of people who have culturally, not just, what about, oh, I shouldn't even get into that. People who have appropriated women now. I mean, think about the fact that a guy was Woman of the Year. I mean, Jenner. I mean, it's crazy to me. That kind of stuff is like, wait a minute. You can be whoever you want to be, but you're taking over somebody else, or an entire group of people, women who have fought for who they are. And our culture is so ass backwards now that we can't even say that or it's considered hateful. And it's the same way that somebody who has dreadlocks is the bad guy because black people have dreadlocks. So I just don't understand it. I really don't. And I think that we've become way too sensitive. And what we've got to do is push that fucking pot back down. As I said earlier, it's okay for people to talk all the shit they want about white people now, just because we're considered just white people, And if you say that, like I just did, you're a racist. And I got to the point where I just don't care anymore. Because I know I'm not a racist. I know I'm not a sexist. I'm not judgmental. I have nothing against any culture and highly respect them. But dude, I wear ponchos and shit when I go out. I want to stay warm. Ponchos are not American, so you just really can't escape it. I'm wearing moccasins right now. I mean, these are just slippers that I don't know who the fuck. Maybe the Native Americans came up with this model. But the thing is, humans do things and share things. So let me ask you, if our culture is really supposed to get over our differences, how is blaming someone for cultural appropriation helping that cause? I guess that's the point I'm coming from. It's like the old thing, I don't see color, but you're white. Like I said, that's why I brought that up. And it gets really absurd at some point. But yeah, Alom said Japan appreciates it when people indulge in their culture. That is true, and some do. Yeah, I mean, I understand your disagree, Logic, but you haven't given me any reasons, because that's just your opinion. You said artifacts should be respected but not taken for oneself. You're not using an artifact, you're using an idea, and ideas don't belong to anyone. Keith says he'd love to hear my opinion on CRT. I don't have one because I haven't read it, and I don't buy into that argument. The whole thing, I think it's probably blown out of proportion as to what they're actually teaching. Put it this way, the people on the right are going nuts about it, and the people on the left are going nuts about it, and I just don't give a shit. I don't want my kids learning it unless I know what's in it, but as long as it's not. Some of the shit I've seen is a little bit concerning. I don't want to say that there's propaganda being shoved down our kids' throats, but there always has been, and we know that's true. So it's a parent's job to curtail that and to be able to nail it before it gets out of control. To be able to, my kid sees right through it. My son's going into high school next year, and he's like, "Oh yeah, the quote trans kids, they all have these cliques in the hall," and he talks about groups that walk down the middle of the hall and won't move out of the way for anybody, and there's this certain attitude of special treatment for people now, people who have played victims, and that's maybe why I get a little heated about the cultural, you know, defining and defending cultural norms as being belonging to one group and cultural appropriation, because it just leads to more racism and more judgment. I don't know. It's complicated shit. It really is. I mean, I don't have strong opinions, but I definitely have opinions about it. So let me catch up on these comments here real quick. Daniel Riley, did you see the transgender figure skater? Wow, incredulous. No, I didn't. But honestly, that's one case where I wouldn't care what gender it is, because it's not a sport that requires actual, like, it's not competition between two people, like, physically. So, and it's not a strength-based thing. It's weight versus strength. God, that's a complicated one. No, I didn't see that one. But the thing about the transgender skater and the other woman and the swimmer and all these ones who have won awards, that kind of shit, I can see why athletes would get upset about it. I mean, I don't have an opinion either way. I would probably be vocal if I was an athlete, but that's up to them to protect their own sports and what they consider to be part of the sport. But that's out of my world because I'm not a sports kind of guy. So, CRT, a USA thing. Yes, Daniel, CRT is actually critical race theory, which, at first I argued that it's being blown out of proportion. It's not that bad. I don't care if my kids learn about blacks and culture. That's not the issue. But then I started reading some of the shit that, they're wanting to teach. And I'm like, it really is a lot of white guilt in some cases. And that's some bullshit right there. I think white guilt needs to be talked about. I think it needs to be talked about because it's bullshit. I'm coming across as a right winger here, and I don't want people to mistake where I'm coming from, because I'm not. I'm a liberal. But I'm a liberal with a brain that thinks these things through and sees where any type of trying to prevent people from speaking, or that's why the cultural appropriation thing, along with language, I think need to be really carefully looked at, especially language. If a person says something and they're trying to offend someone, that's fucked up if they're trying to be a racist and they're saying something that's hurtful. I don't consider that worthy of any type of being locked up. I don't consider it. I think the term hate speech is widely abused these days, because I think a majority of people, I mean, and we've all seen this. I mean, most people have seen plenty of videos of somebody screaming at a checker or a McDonald's worker and then calling him a racist because they didn't give him the right order. Or, it's like, it's become this kind of throw around catch-all term. And the same thing with transphobe. And the minute people started calling Joe a transphobe, Joe Rogan, I mean, then when I really looked at the kinds of things people were saying about him and others, the more that I realized how full of shit that they are about one or two people, the more I have to go back and look at, well, what about this other person that people claimed was a hateful person? What did they actually say? And you find out a lot of the time that their intention was not to be homophobic, was not to be racist or hateful. And I think it's important to be respectful of other people, but not under the knife. You know what I mean? Like just this kind of forced compliant speech. And I'm curious to know what y'all think about that too, because at what point should we be censored? It's frustrating to me because I've had a lot of my videos deleted and had my channel deleted once and had to like get it reinstated, and I've had several videos censored and made irrelevant to the YouTube algorithm basically, but because they dealt with one or more controversial topics. You know what I mean? It's a tricky one. Be right back. Oh boy. It's Sunday night and I have to work tomorrow, so, you know, what a great time for a live cast, right? So bad at skating as a Canadian. I don't know. I don't know about that one. Sorry, I'm reading through the comments here. Electric cars with the symbol. Uh-oh. What about a symbol? I missed that one. Keith says, I have teachers in my district that push their personal values on my children. Thoughts? Yeah, I think it's fucked up. And actually, I was talking with my wife and I said, I think it's blown out of proportion, that I don't think most teachers are doing this. But I've seen enough TikTok teachers or, some of the at least clips of these teachers to be like, okay, are they trying to just go viral by being extreme? Or is this person really that bad? Let's put it this way. If a teacher of my children started bringing up their own sexual behavior in class or talking about that shit, I'd be in that classroom. No, I wouldn't contact the district. I'd be in that fucking classroom confronting that teacher, and I'd make sure that that teacher was fired. That kind of shit will not stand. It's unacceptable. And there are some teachers doing that kind of stuff, and I think teachers should just, I think we need teachers, we need good teachers, but they're there to do a job. Just like I'm not there to, when I go to build a tiny house at work, I don't just add an extra window somewhere because I think it'd look good. If a customer wants something the way they want it, that's the way they want it. And when it comes to education, parents don't want teachers teaching their kids values. And that's, some would disagree and say, oh, the schools don't teach kids values anymore. I'm like, good. They shouldn't. That's a parental choice. That's something I want them there for learning the basics, arithmetic. But honestly, none of that shit matters. It's socialization that matters the most to me. That's why people will say, oh, they'll learn more with homeschooling. I'm like, but more what? I mean, more how to read a little better or do better math, but they have no social skills whatsoever sometimes. And so you've got to take them out and meet them up with groups. So it's the same basic thing. But I don't take school too seriously. I definitely would take it seriously if I found out that a teacher was teaching my kids stuff that I didn't agree with. And that is a tricky one as a parent, man. Mm-mm-mm. Oh, the swastika. Oh, yeah. The swastika goes way back to, yeah, Buddhist practices. Whether it's reversed or forward. It's good you brought that up. And I was thinking about the swastika the other day, and I told my boss that. I said, when I was really into the occult and symbology for a while, I mean, around 2011 to like 2014, something like that. I was really into the occult stuff, and I was reading tons of books about symbols, and I've got all these weird tarot books and unlimited amount of what I now consider just woo-woo bullshit. Not that it's all bullshit, but that it's a pick your own delusion type thing. And so I was reading a lot of books about symbology and started understanding where that, of course, the swastika came from and how Hitler took over Hitler was really into symbols and the occult, and he wanted to use them for power. He was looking for the talisman and all these, the spear, from Jesus, and spear of destiny, right? So all these different things that Hitler was doing, he was hoping were luck, and that's the same thing that goes back in time, that you would base it on the tides or the moons, whether you'd go to battle. He actually did that stuff, and lost. But those symbols are very powerful, but at the same time, the conclusion I came to from my research on these symbols was that they're meaningless. I remember having a peace symbol. My friend gave me like this cardboard peace sign, and I had it in the background in one of my videos. And some guy just started going off about, don't you know what that means? It's a broken cross, yada yada. And I was like, no, it's not. It's a peace symbol. And I knew what he was talking about. But after we debated it, I just said, no, it's a peace symbol. I said, you pick any symbol you want, and you can call it whatever you want. I've got tattoos on my leg. I've got a tattoo of a whole bunch of different freaking symbols down here on my ankle, and one of them is a circle with an X in the middle. A person might see that and say, oh, that's the symbol for Earth, which it was. But somebody could also say, oh, that's a rifle sight. That's a symbol for white power. And it's all interpretation, so much of everything. It's the same way that, everything is completely misinterpreted. And that brings right back full circle to intention, what we started talking about in this video. Fucking intention and the meaning behind it. And that's just like the same thing. If somebody's wearing a headdress and somebody's screaming at them about it, maybe explain it to them. You know what I mean? I don't know. Sorry, I can move out through this side, but family life. My wife went to the store a while ago, so doing the family stuff. At any rate, I'm going back through the comments here to see. Hey, Eric, thank you for the heart, my friend. I appreciate that. A South swastika. Interesting. Al Ohm says, we would say cultural appropriation, but the culture that shared the symbol believed we are all one source. Good point, I guess. No Limit says, whatever. What do you mean, whatever? Okay. One time in middle school, a friend searched one of our teachers and desks and found a vibratory. That's funny. Logic says, do you value cultural preservation? Carpo, to me, it's something that holds value. Taking something outside of its cultural context dilutes its value over time. I don't agree at all. I mean, it depends on what you mean by value. Like, how do you devalue something by sharing in it? That doesn't make sense to me. I don't get it. No, dude, you're not harsh and mellow. I'm actually hoping you'll respond, Logic, because I mean, I'd really like to hear a good. I know you're a logical person. I respect your opinion. That's why I'd actually love to hear a good logical argument as to who's actually bothered by cultural appropriation and which culture. And you're just a white guy who's bothered by it. But would you be bothered if somebody borrowed something from a culture, your culture? Do you have a culture? You know what I mean? And it's kind of a degrading thing, I guess. A lot of white people say, oh, we have no culture. But it's not like I said, my ancestors are Scottish and people wear those tartans. When I see somebody wearing one of those tartan clothes, or a kilt, even if they're not Scottish, I would never be bothered by that. So I think what you're getting at is that some cultures are more sensitive about these things, therefore they might be more bothered. But often, let's say it's an African garb and a white person's wearing it. It's ridiculous, of course. Like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer wearing these like African things and trying to pretend like they are totally in touch, which, was ridiculous, but off topic. I don't think it would be offensive to people who actually live in those cultures. I think it would be offensive to Americans on behalf of those cultures. You see what I'm getting at? I don't think that most cultures are offended by Americans or anyone using or sharing or celebrating what they have. Like if you're wearing it to insult them, that's different. It's intention. But I don't know how it dilutes something, thousands of miles away overseas that you're wearing a pair of pants that somebody else wears on an island. You see what I mean? Or sandals. If you've ever worn sandals, you're appropriating, caveman materials. How far do you take it? And if you really break it down, you'll start to see what we're talking about is cultures we feel have been abused or minimized in the past, right? And that's, I think, at least that's what I've seen. Because it's not all cultures people are bothered by. If somebody in America were to use Russian stuff, wear clothes that were made in Russia, nobody's going to think twice about that. Be like, oh, that's different. That's a different culture. It's not black. And so I think that by selecting just black or red or brown people, then that's racist in itself. If you see what I mean, that's giving special treatment because we feel bothered by other cultures. Borrowing from other cultures, rather. Super complicated shit, but I mean, but it's really that simple. It comes down to saying what you want to say and being able to say it. And being who you want to be without somebody else telling you you shouldn't be that person. And as far as I'm concerned, if a white guy wants to wear a full Native American garb, he'll get made fun of all the time, probably. But a lot of people probably won't care, and they'll probably accept him. And if a white guy went into a tribe and said, "I want to wear your stuff," a lot of white dudes back in the day actually did end up joining up with the tribes. Some soldiers would like leave and end up staying with them, and they were welcomed in. They didn't consider them, "Oh, you're a different color appropriating." They're like, "You're one of us." And yeah, I don't think people are as offended as we think we are, or we think they are. I think people are offended on their behalf. But don't marsh the mill. Highway Child, good to see you, my friend. I don't know if I've said hello yet. Scottish are sound people. Yes. Eric says Chad with. He's saying, what is a Chad? Is that what you're asking? What the hell is a Chad? Oh, a Chad is your typical fit, buff, tough guy, your perfectly sculpted male. It's really something that these groups that call themselves incels or involuntary celibate or the male red pill group or the men going their own way group, which all of them are really pathetic. And I don't mean the people, because a lot of young men are completely led astray, and that's what they have. I just like to say, get away from that shit. It's totally toxic. Blaming women for problems or assuming women are somehow less than you is never going to solve any problems. But the Chads are considered to be these perfect guys who get all the women they want, and they're the problem. That all the young, the other guys can't get any chicks. It's a total delusion. Yeah, there's good-looking guys who get laid, but that doesn't make you a happy, healthy, satisfied person. That's not how it works. You can have all the money and bitches in the world, and it ain't gonna make you a happy person. It might definitely soften the blow, but hey, that's just not how it works. So, I want to join a tribe, says Keith. Hell yeah. Hey man, there's a lot of tribes that would take you in. It's funny. Some people have gone into the most hostile areas and been brought into these tribes because I think people are as fascinated with anyone in the West as we would be by people that we newly discovered, right? It's like a mutual fascination. The thing is that we know in the West in our minds that our cultures, especially a lot of in the past, which have been a lot of white cultures, but all races have done it, have invaded other countries and have not just culturally appropriated it, but forced our cultural appropriation on them, right? So forcing them to take the white man's thing, the white man's, schools, and especially what's happened in Canada with the schools, the Catholic schools. I mean, religion has done some horrific things to other cultures. Just say that there's some sort of it's horrendous, the bullshit we've made other people go through, taking kids from their parents and sending them to white men's schools, boarding schools, and forcing them to learn English and stuff. So there's a history of forcing other people to join your culture, and that's way more common in the past. In the past, it was very rare that people would say, "Oh, I want to look like another culture," even though there were always going to be imitators. But I think that's only an issue today. That's why I think cultural appropriation is just something that people only have the time to give a shit about when they really don't have much else going on or nothing else to do. Like the people who are online complaining about it all the time, they call them, like, there's another one called culture vultures. I think there's a whole bunch of different names for people. And I'm the kind of guy who would just put on a headdress right now just to make a point. I mean, I'm really sick of people blaming others for how they feel because of what they do in their lives. And I think that there's this total disconnect. It's like whenever people say the terms, white people, like totally lump everybody together. I think, damn, that's racist as fuck. Like everyone's different. Everyone's unique, each one of us. And it sucks because that's why I always say, how would you know what kind of a person you are? Well, if you had nothing else but your words that you could use. And I thought that, well, if you were thrown out of your house, you lost everything you own, you were totally naked on the streets, even then you'd still have your color and your voice. Let's say you just had to type everything. How would you carry yourself? What kind of a person really are we? And sorry, that's a very scattered fucking thought there, but I need to figure out how to properly articulate the thought that's in my mind. I'll get there. But it's learning a language like this. Logic says it's ideological colonization. That's not a real term, bro. That is not a real term, and you know it. Come on, you got to do better than that. Ideological colonization. I mean, yeah, you're colonizing an idea. That doesn't harm anybody. It really doesn't harm any individual. You can colonize a place. That's one thing. That's setting up a colony there. But that usually means, by definition, a colony is when you go to another place and you impose your shit on them. Wearing something that somebody else wears is not colonialization or colonization. It just does not even fit the description. Eric says, I watched the Pope publicly apologize to the tribes in Canada. Pfft, yeah, the Pope. Oh, God, I can't believe people listen to that guy still. Logic says, you missed what I said above. What did I say? What did he say? Hold on, I'm going back. No, you just said don't mean to harsh the mellow, and then it was just the ideological colonization. That was the only ones I got. Hopefully hopefully I read them all. But I mean, I'm being trying to be as kind as I can because I'm not. I have nothing against you. I love these discussions. These are important discussions, debates rather, and they often leave both everyone walking around or walking away with a newfound something to mull around in our heads. See, I'm not trying to change your mind, and I know you're not trying to change my mind. And since we respect each other, we can have these conversations. I come across a little abrasive at times. I don't mean to. My main thing is that I want people to always have good reasons for why they think what they think and what they believe. Because if we don't, then it falls apart pretty quick. And when I started looking for people who feel like their culture is being appropriated, I couldn't really find any. I could only find college-age kids who are, or maybe trustafarians, people who just have a trust fund or have parents with enough money to where they've never faced any real adversity, and they're focused on what's going on in other people's lives. Like if you've got the time to search out other people for what they're wearing far away from you and worry about that, I don't see that as, it's almost like you're creating the pain for yourself, if that makes sense. It's seeking out, I think that a lot of the victimhood that people are seeking right now, just like with the gay and trans community is another issue that I'm not going to touch on this other than to say that a lot of people seem to think that everybody's hateful and wants to hurt people in their group, and I don't know anybody who does. Most people just say, oh, it's just like a passing thing. Do what you do. But it's almost like they come running after you like, no, look at me, I'm different, and you have to accept me. Okay, fine, I accept you. And no, that's not good enough. You have to be an ally. And I hope you know where I'm getting. It's a metaphor. It's not a literal person running after you, but I don't know how to handle living in a society where people want you to care about what their life means, so they concern themselves with what you're doing in your life. You see what I mean? So I guess that's why I would ask if cultural appropriation is real. I would like to know if wearing like I said, a plaid shirt that's a tartan from Scotland would be cultural appropriation, because my culture goes back a long way in Scotland, and we have a family crest and our own colors. And I'd like to know, if you could answer that, what the difference would be between that and a white guy with dreadlocks. And don't tell me it's because I'm white, because that's racist. Yeah. I got to grab something. I'll be right back. I feel like we like to generalize a lot, as humans. And so therefore, people will say, if I said something like, well, there's a lot of people that were, of other races, cultures and genders, that were born more wealthy and better off than I am. So how am I not the one that's oppressed? And they would say, well, that's different because you grew up as a white guy. And I would say, but what does that matter? And they'd say, well, because you have white privilege. And I would say, what is that privilege? And yada, yada. And when you break it on down the line, you start to realize that that's just not a thing anymore. I mean, it's not. There's no real privilege to being white. And so it's kind of a talking point that people use that doesn't really exist. Now, I'm not going to say that the fact that I'm a white male doesn't give me advantages. I'd be a fool to say that. But honestly, the fact that I'm a male, the greatest advantage is feeling like I can protect myself or walk down the street by myself without being threatened by other people. I'm 6 foot 2.5, so I'm imposing over other people, and they leave me alone. And I'm intelligent, and I've worked for all these things in my life that I have. So I feel like I've at least put something forward in this world and made the best effort I can. And that's all any human really wants. And like I'm saying, most people aren't focused on the race as much as society wants people to think they are, or at least I would call it the Twitter fodder, I guess. I don't know how else to put it. No smoking. If people adopt aspects of a powerful majority, that's different. Um, well, then that's I don't know how that's different. Logic says if Scottish people are a minority, then it would be. It's related to power. Who says that though? Who defines that? And that's what I'm trying to figure out. You're giving the exact talking points that I've heard from other people. That do you believe tell me you're not one of those people that says that black people can't be racists, because I've heard that too, and that's exactly the same argument. I've heard this so many times where people say, well, black people can't be racist because you can only be a racist if you are a colonizer or you are the oppressor. And honestly, it was just like left with my tongue on the floor, my jaw on the floor, just like, what the fuck did this person say? And then I started hearing more and more people say this. Famous people, celebrities saying this shit. Okay, fine. Believe what you like, right? But yes, I've heard a lot of people who are racist that are many other colors than white. So I really don't buy into the argument of whether it's a minority or not. But let me just tell you this. I bet Scottish people in this country are a minority compared to black people. Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. And it doesn't matter. I mean, are blacks a minority? What if it's in an area where it's a majority black? So can you have dreadlocks then? And what do you mean by minority? In the fact that you might think a group that's oppressed, but do we still oppress people, or do we have affirmative action? Do we have different hiring practices? Do we have more representation in Hollywood? Do we have more representation everywhere? Like we always did, even through the 80s. There are plenty of black actors. It's just, we seem to want to make everything fair without asking ourselves whether every culture wants to do every single thing in exactly equal amounts. It's like we want to homogenize everything, and I honestly don't see that as a solution. It's the same way that people talk about, they're doing actually, a lot of places do planned cities where people want to move, and have interracial neighborhoods, but you find a lot of people will group together based on their culture and their race, not because they're racist, but because they like being with people who have the same values as them, and it's just a natural thing. We're trying to push that away because we're uncomfortable about that truth, that we are tribal by nature, and that there is no, everybody's going to be happy and we're all going to live together in harmony. I mean, people can get along in any race or culture or gender. It doesn't matter. That's not the point. It's just the people who are the most concerned are the ones that don't have any real adversity against them. It's almost like they're worried about on behalf of others, and I haven't really seen any good reason to be worried about cultural appropriation at this point. Honestly, I think it's a very small thing, but that's just me, of course. Okay, I'm reading on through the comments here. Jackass. Start a trust fund for my sister's kids. Dude, fuck the kids, man. No, kidding. Yeah, that's what he says. I worry about that. Would a trust fund spoil them? Yeah, my dad left me a trust fund. I think my aunt gambled it away, and then we ended up starting with nothing. And you know what? It's fine. It builds a lot of humility to start from zero, and I really, really think. Hey, Sprocaster, good to see you. Mm-mm. Logic, did you just quote Business Insider? The wealth gap between white and black persisted. That doesn't. The wealth gap between rich and poor is huge. I mean, I'm not making any of that wealth. It's not my fault that, there's a cultural system of it's not a bias system. It's a money system. In other words, people will cut corners anywhere they can, and I just don't see that as a reason. Like, I don't see how you would lead a Business Insider article about that claims a wealth gap still exists to saying a white guy shouldn't have dreadlocks. It, they're the two just, it doesn't make sense to me. I don't get it. Highway says, look at prison populations. Dude, that one's bad. In fact, in Oregon, it's horrible. And thank God that they've run out of like public defenders because they have to let people go. The problem is they're letting violent people go. But the drugs that at least they've made legal for that reason, it's like completely tolerated down there now. And that's a bad thing, but it's also a good thing. I mean, it can work against you. I mean, like, we as a society try so many different things. We want to make things fair and equal and not, be biased against people just because they're drug users or whatnot. And if it takes the race card to get there, so be it, man. I mean, just like Portland cops stopped pulling people over, and they claimed because it was racial bias. So they don't pull people over for expired tags anymore. I'm like, great, whatever it takes to get cops to leave people alone, all people. But there are plenty of white guys that get choked out and have their necks stomped on every day too. And when you really look at the numbers, it's not a racial issue; it's a cop problem. And but there's just the media is just so good at playing people's emotions, and it's so difficult to get any real data or information these days. Um, Everything's pretty tightly controlled these days on the internet as far as information flow. And yeah, you can go to some extreme sites and get some bad info. Everybody has like all the facts for you within 5 minutes of something happening, but it's just a fucked up world sometimes. Logic says there are disadvantaged groups. Yes, there are. That has nothing to do with having dreadlocks, though. They're not the same. They're not. Okay, let me ask: how would a person not wearing a fuck? I can't even think of what you mean by cultural appropriation. I don't know where you would draw the lines. I would assume you've never eaten Mexican food then, because Mexico is a disadvantaged population. And if you've eaten Mexican food, then you're culturally appropriating. I, I don't know how clothing would be any different from that. So, logic, have you eaten Mexican food? And if so, do you feel guilty because of it? Do you play guitar? I think you play guitar. And I want you to know that the guitar was invented overseas, not in America. And God, I'm being condescending now. I'm sorry, but this is what I'm saying. You break it down, and you're saying a lot of people who have been disadvantaged. Well, many people have been disadvantaged, even many of the people who invented these things. But it doesn't mean that we can't enjoy them. It's like the old let people have their fun. I mean, it's like it's not harming anybody physically. The only people it's harming is those who spend their time worrying about it, and that's a very small, vocal internet minority, at least in my experience. But yes, there are disadvantaged groups. I agree. Actually, that's funny you said that, Dan. I was thinking about dreads. My buddy's got some fatty dreads, and I was thinking I've never wanted dreads. I hate dreads. And I was like, the other day, I was like, that might actually be fun. Because I thought about cutting my hair off, and I was like, no, maybe I'll just do dreads first, just for fun, and then shave it later. But I don't know. Nah, probably not. Sounds nasty. You've never eaten Mexican food, Logic? Yeah, sure. Yeah, you know what I'm saying, brother. You do. I'm sure that you have worn something that another culture invented. And when you talk about a disadvantaged group, I guess what you're basically saying is whichever is the flavor of the day, whichever disadvantaged group today happens to be disadvantaged at this moment is the one that you can't, appropriate. I just don't buy that. I don't know who came up with that. There's no textbook or definition for that. That comes 100% down to your opinion, and there's no way around that. So I know a lot of people agree with that, and that's fine. But, all the college kids screaming about equality and safe spaces and all that shit, that's what it reminds me of. I feel like that's what I am completely focused on avoiding any type of safe space bullshit. it's really sad to me that have gotten to the point now where we're so afraid of hearing other people's opinions that, you know, we will get people, fired from their jobs, um, or physically beat them down, even just because they have a different opinion than we do and they feel a certain way. And it's kind of like, it's funny, like back in, I remember during the riots, the protests during COVID, and I went down there to film, and I've got tons of footage, and I was like right on the front lines when the cops instigated all this trouble and started, uh, started throwing their tear gas, and we all got tear gassed out, and it was horrible. Great footage, but a horrible experience. And I saw how the public reacted to that, and there was two opinions. One was like, yeah, screw those protesters, screw the rioters, shoot at them, shoot them down. And then the other side was like, oh, dude, that's messed up. You shouldn't do that. That's a peaceful protest. Both were right because the majority of people were there peacefully protesting and dispersed when that happened. A small group, a very small group, 1%, if that, probably like a half a percent, dressed in their little baklavas and their hoodies, and they decided to run around, break windows, right? Nothing to do with the protest. Breaking historical society, trying to make some sort of a point because they're like, we're stopping the oppressors. They cut down statues and spray painted a bunch of businesses. And so I'm like, how is this helping the minority communities when you're burning and looting and destroying those very businesses that those people have built up within this community, right? And the point I'm making here is that that small minority was the one that was focused on by much of the right wing media, especially, right? So the left was saying peaceful protest, peaceful protest. The ones on the right were saying, look at all these rioters, they're burning down their cities. And somewhere in the middle was the truth. The minority of people who were causing trouble can do a lot of damage. Now, this is the exact same thing that's happening online with people who worry about cultural appropriation or call everyone a racist, or the people who are obsessed with, Twitter and making sure everybody's saying the right thing, the internet police. And you find that they are some of the most vile people out there, some of the most the way they talk to other people that they don't agree with is even worse than the shit that they claim others do. It's like this hidden anger that people want to take out on others, and they do it under the guise of protecting others. And so a lot of people have this extreme anger built up, so they go out and cause trouble and even beat other people up because they say, "Oh, you're the enemy because you're an oppressor." And it's like that's kind of how I see the bigger picture of what's going on right now. That most of society doesn't care about all these things, and that a very small minority of media and internet personalities really blow everything out of proportion. And when one YouTuber makes a story about something, like 20 more fucking jump on ship, and it just becomes this echo chamber of bullshit. But anyway, that's just how I feel about it. Eating food is not appropriating it. You're correct. And it's eating it. Just like wearing clothes is not appropriating it, it's wearing it. You're not taking the identity, dude. I'm not talking about a guy dressed in full fucking I guess I don't know where you're coming from. I don't think you do either. I don't think you really have a definition. And I'd have to see a list laid out of what exactly cultural appropriation is. So let's just start with the dreadlock thing. Are dreadlocks cultural appropriation? If so, should everyone who's not black who has dreads cut their dreads? Should all the football players who have an Asian tattoo get it removed? It's funny because that exact thing happened. There was a white guy who had dreads, and he was a football player. And one of the black football players started giving him shit about cultural appropriation. And he said, "Yeah, you shouldn't have dreads." He says, "I'll tell you what, I'll cut off my dreads when you get rid of your." Oh no, it was a Chinese guy with dreads, wasn't it? Pretty sure. Damn it. Maybe he didn't have dreads. Can't see a Chinese guy with dreads. It was a Chinese guy that had something from the black culture on. And a black basketball player or football player said he should get rid of it. And he said, "I will as soon as you get those tattoos, Chinese tattoos removed," which was a total call out. I mean, he did. He had Chinese tattoos on his arm. And I think that that's where it comes down to defining the exact parameters of what it means. So If dreadlocks aren't acceptable, then you'll have to talk to the hippie community about that one. The Wook community. Gloves were invented by Eskimos. Hell yeah, bro. Hell yeah. Relax room popular. Shared that footage. Eric, yes, I would like to share that footage. I have a lot. Highway Child says, what do you think of taking down mascots because they have Native Americans on them? I don't get it. To me, it's paying homage. Honestly, that's a great example because I believe it is too. Although I think that the Redskins was an exception, the football team. But let me just put it this way: there was what was it? There was a great example of this. Well, there was a South Park. They did an episode about the Redskins where they took the name the Redskins too. Said, "Yeah, we're the Redskins. Go fuck yourself." That was their motto, and it was a kind of a play of saying, look, we can do this too. But as far as the mascots thing, I would say talk to the communities that the mascots represent and see what they think. But that goes back to what I said about, something I learned a couple months ago. So this is right in line with this. I found out that, I was thinking about the helicopters for the U.S. military. Got the Apache, you know what I mean? The Navajo, I think. There's a whole bunch of different helicopters, military helicopters, that are all named after native tribes. And at first I thought, that's really fucked up that they would do that. And my instant reaction was like, God, that's just some bullshit right there. And then I started thinking further. I was like, well, no, helicopters came around long after all those battles. So I read up on it and did some historical research and found out that it was to pay homage to the tenacity of the tribes that fought back. Very specifically, it was all done in total respect to the tribes. And I thought, that's funny. I jumped to conclusions about that. And that, I don't know. Then again, there's people who look completely white, then have 1/8 black in them, and you wouldn't know. Maybe they've got dreads. And then there's people who look black, but they're not. And it all comes down to what we view. These kind of topics aren't even discussable these days because it's just considered hate speech. You can't talk about color, you can't talk about gender, you can't talk about transitioning or surgery or taking pills that are going to totally change the way that your hormones operate when you're 16 years old, and or letting my 5-year-old decide their gender. I'm just like, it's a weird world, and I just want my family to be able to grow up with some sort of a normalcy out there where people aren't worried about all that shit, especially being worried about what other people do in their homes, because it's none of my business, just like what I do is not their business. And fuck the world. You know what I mean? So my thought on mascots, it depends on the mascot. FTX. You do not use no FTX. Any statue seems like a piece of history to me, says Eric. It is, but I can also understand how certain histories need to be removed. During the civil rights movement, a lot of the statues that were torn down in the South, or out east, South, wherever the hell they were torn down, the General Lee statues, stuff like that. General Lee was a traitor to the country. You know what I mean? Like, technically, I'm not arguing semantics and technicalities here or values or morals. Just the fact that literally he was a traitor to the country by definition. And to put up a statue of him is one thing, but it was done in the 50s or the 60s during the civil rights movement. A huge amount of the statues in the South were put up as a response to the civil rights movement, a way of saying, oh yeah, well, this is what we think. And you can look that up. It's historic fact. So that's why a lot of those people wanted to take down, and especially when they're in public places. And I don't think anybody should have to look at a historically racist piece of shit in their community if it's on public property they're paying tax dollars for. Doesn't mean a person can't put a statue up. But honestly, I don't want statues of any people on my fucking public places. I mean, I don't celebrate humans. I celebrate ideas. And it takes many humans to carry those ideas. Someday there will be a giant statue of Elon Musk on Mars, and nobody will know what a total douchebag piece of shit he really was. because nobody does today. I'm a little harsh, but I can't help it. Telescopes and moon filters. Yeah, I have a nice telescope I used to use for looking at the moon, and I can fill the whole field of view. You know, it's a reflecting telescope. But I wanted to get out there in a few days and see if I can see that comet with it, which is supposed to be visible from. Yeah, that'd be cool to see. Okay, logic says no one should do anything. That's authoritarianism, but you can appropriate things that a minority identifies with. Let people have their identity. Like I said, it doesn't take their identity. Right? It's who you choose to have an identity, and your identity is nobody else's business. Because it's not their identity. They culturally appropriated that from another culture, or from people they grew up with. Like it's learned behavior. It's human behavior. If maybe you like that culture and you choose that culture, I don't understand where you're coming from, really. Yes, Jackass says they involved the native tribes in the commissioning. Okay, that's something I didn't know. That's a great one. That's really important. That's an important factor in that. I didn't know that. I heard about that. They did one recently, and I heard that they did have them involved. I feel like we're way too culturally sensitive right now about things that really don't exist, and that's what I mean. I need. I mean, if somebody gave me a list of perfect examples, literal examples of cultural appropriation that actually harms the culture, then I could pick every one of them apart and show how it does no harm to that culture at all whatsoever. But even further, even if it did show some sort of a harm to that culture, I would say it would only be in the minds of the individuals who believe it's doing them harm. In other words, it's psychosomatic. We're creating our own illnesses by believing racism is there when it's not, by believing people are hateful or have bad intentions when they don't, and just some simple wook walking across a parking lot with dreads and a tie-dye on is a threat all of a sudden because he's destroying African culture. It makes no sense to me. It doesn't. And it's funny because I have a lot of empathy for people who suffer. I have a lot of empathy for people who truly suffer. But I don't think anybody's suffering because a white guy has dreadlocks. I don't think tribes way over in Africa who started this whole thing give two shits what's going on in America. And so, but maybe they do. And if so, tough fucking shit, you know? Like we were talking about earlier, everybody shares everything. And, you know, beer, I would call America or the USA the cultural appropriation capital of the world because that's all we had. Because we're literally a fucking amalgam of so many different cultures. So if there's any one place where there's an exception where people should be able to just share and do whatever we want, I think that's a great thing. You know, Jewish families cooking dinners for Catholics and vice versa, and churches getting together on certain days and setting aside their differences. People have culture, but not everyone's offended about their culture. Not everyone's protective of their culture. Because it's kind of like if I said, yeah, I love my family, and they said, I love my family too, but I also love your family. There's no way in hell I would feel like they're appropriating my love or my family. They just love my family too, and that's a good thing. Anything else is just judgmental. Like it's like circular. I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to think of any way where something could be truly appropriated. I would say if something is totally done for just profit, like okay, if Walmart starts selling fucking headdresses for $4.99, then I'll be with you. That's a different story. Of course, when I was a kid, you could go in and get a native set. I don't know if you can do that anymore. I think you can buy the cowboys, but you could probably buy the Indian headdress somewhere if you really wanted to. I just think people need to be toughened up. I can't be offended on behalf of others. That's just it right there. I totally agree. Hey, yo, good to see you, my friend. Jackass. When I was in Rome, I saw a flawed hand of the original. I hope it wasn't too expensive. Oh, I need to stand for a minute here. Regain my thoughts. That was a good discussion, I guess. I don't feel like I really resolved the issue of cultural appropriation, but I don't think we can because I don't think it's a real thing. Um, at least not in the capacity where it does any literal damage to any real cultures. If you think about it, you know, we have a lot of casinos here in the US. That was kind of our thing for a while. And then the Native Americans, we gave them permission to start their own casinos. And the question I guess one could ask was, are they culturally appropriating, casinos? No, of course not. They have casinos because they're great. They make a lot of money and it makes sense. But nobody's really offended. They actually are just like, cool, Native Americans have casinos now. Let's go there. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I would say on a side note, it does seem unfair to a lot of people that white people ain't got no culture. And let me just clarify what I mean by that. And as like I said, a tall white guy, like I told my wife, I was like, I'm the whitest of the white, because we were joking about how she was saying how she saw somebody who was like an eighth black, and you would never know it, and how it's easy to assume things about people. And I was like, well, I'm the whitest white guy there is. I mean, my mom's side was German, my dad's was Scottish, and my grandparents moved over, I think, from Scotland, and or maybe it was my great grandparents. But at any rate, my last name's Orr, O-R-R. It means like black rooster, or I like to say black cock, but black rooster. And I looked up my coat of arms, and my middle name's Campbell. So, I've got all the Scottish names, and I've always been interested in the culture that I came from. But I don't consider it my culture because I guess I didn't grow up there. So, but we all have this kind of yearning within ourselves to find identity and find culture and figure out who we are as individuals. That's something that you just can't fucking ignore. And this is the same way, like my stepson, when I met him, I consider him my son. I met my wife when her son was like 3.5, I think, or he was just turning 4. And we've been together ever since. And I raised him like he was my own. And now that he's older, he got into his mid 20s and he wanted to meet his real dad. I mean, his dad didn't even know he existed. Like his dad didn't even know that he was there. But to him, that connection with his roots was so important that he had to do it. And I understood that. I didn't look at that as like a knock on me as his dad. I didn't think of it as a bad thing. It was a positive thing because it made him happier. And I bring that up because it's like culture. It's part of his culture to understand where he came from. His parents are the very root of our culture. And especially since most of us don't know who the hell we are. And our culture often in America is based around not community. I mean, I envy people like in the Amish community. All right? Fucking amazing. I mean, the more I learn about them, the more I realize, okay, so some of the oldest Amish, or what they would call the old world Amish, I guess they're the ones who actually do use electricity in some ways, or use vehicles anyway, maybe not electricity. They have different rules, and it's not what you would think, but they seem happy in their lives. Now, it doesn't mean they're always going to be happy. Times are rough, but that culture that they've developed for themselves has allowed them to flourish and not be so dependent on others by being dependent on their own community. And that is a very satisfying thing for people. Everybody's yearning for that simpler life. And I'm not talking about the simple life in the woods, but a simpler, happier life where you come home, maybe you can work from home. That's not all it's cracked up to be, but being able to go out and enjoy yourself and with people you love and respect, I guess. Anyway, I've been on here for a long time already. I see I've lost a bunch of people, probably because I'm rambling. That's good. Logic says, how about the Rolling Stones who made millions copying Howling Wolf? He pioneered it, and the Rolling Stones, when they met him, he literally was a janitor. Well, that's called stealing music. That's not cultural appropriation. That's not the same thing at all. Yeah, dude, I mean, look at George Harrison. He stole songs he didn't even know he stole. There's a lot of subconscious stealing. Look at Led Zeppelin, dude. Led Zeppelin came over to the U.S. They're the perfect example. They come over to the U.S. and they sent over scouts to listen to like Southern blues and slide rock and stuff like that, and then they took it back, the recordings, and then they listened to it so they could figure out what they wanted to play, and they copied directly songs from American bands. Do I think Led Zeppelin's any shittier band? Yeah, I lost a little respect because of that, but not much, because they made it their own thing. And that's what I think a lot of people do with culture. They don't necessarily appropriate it. They find something they like and they turn it into something else they like more. If you make money off of that, that's totally different. That's profiteering, that's corruption, and that's what a lot of people do. That's like how businesses make all their money. Country, if you, yeah, if you go into the Congo as a corporation and you rape their environment and then you wear their garb and pretend like you're just like them, yeah, you're definitely culturally appropriating. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people wearing clothing, and that just does not even cross the same bars off. It does not check the same boxes in a Walmart bag. Great grandmother was a Campbell, huh? Eric says I identify with beer. I do too, and tonight it's a Boneyard double IPA. 9%. Good stuff. Jackass says I had a Led Zeppelin phase, but I grew out of it. So did I. Then I grew back into it. You go back and forth. Um, that Eric's like during the pandemic, yeah. To assume everyone has the capability from work to home. Well, the pandemic was hopefully an eye opener to people to realize that things aren't always what they appear to be. You know, I don't always think enough before I speak, so if I pause, it always feels weird. I tend to just blurt things out because I feel like dead space is a bad thing, but it's not. It's a good thing. I'm glad you can all be here with me today. Even though I see I've lost about 10 people, probably because I'm ranting about cultural appropriation too much. Damn you, logic. You sucked up the energy. Um, it's things like that that really don't. They matter only as much as we need to discuss them as rational people and figure out where we went wrong in society in our country in the last few years and how to get back on track. There, go back and watch a bunch of 80s movies, you know? Look at all the black businessmen and all the Mexican actors, and, not a huge amount, obviously. You got Cheech and Chong, right? But, of course, somebody would say, oh, well, they're just the controversial, stereotypical pot smokers. But it wasn't that simple. Many different cultures have been represented through several years and several decades even. But even if you look back at the 60s and 70s, there were a lot of different cultures in movies and in music. In fact, they've dominated a lot of the, certain genres. And it's like, yet we still think that we haven't made any progress. That there's still this claim that everyone's a racist. That everything is structurally set up to make everyone else fail except for the white man. And maybe I'm standing up for the white man a little bit here. What can I say? Better Off Dead, says Eric. Yeah, that was a good one. Or Weekend at Bernie's. Oh, Better Off Dead was great, dude. That's the one where the kid's riding his bike the whole time and he's like, I want my $2. He owes the paper kid $2 for the paper. Yeah, good one. My brother would be cracking up if we were talking about that shit. But so yeah, I feel like in order for us to become ourselves, to create a self, we have to abandon a lot of what society is telling us is true. But at the same time, we still have to hang on to some sort of cultural norms, for lack of a better term. And when I say culture, I mean whatever we have in our local community. The Philly cheesesteak culture, right? Is totally different than Oregon microbrew culture. There are cultures surrounding everything. And it's something that's developed so many different paths and so many different directions that it's like putting your that's why they call America the melting pot, because all these cultures melt together and it's a stew and an amalgam of so many different ideas. And it there should be at least one country where people can resonate with who they want to be, even if that is somebody else. I mean, you think about it, there are actually people who imitate individuals, like Elvis Presley impersonators, for example. I mean, they're taking an entire person's identity, but they do it out of respect. But they're also making money on it. That's a hard one. What about cover bands? You know, your favorite cover band that plays music. That's a tricky one too. Um, Fedoras. Did I say the word fedoras? Oh my god. Yeah, that's I still have one that I wear sometimes because it's fun. But it was from the 80s. It's a Billabong fedora from the 80s, not the resurgence in the 2000s. But Jackass says there are many black people who aren't into the chaos we have now. Oh, if you mean they're not buying into the BS that's being claimed on behalf of them, you're correct. There are some very, very intelligent and capable philosophers and scientists and doctors and respected journalists from all different backgrounds and all different races who basically will tell you, whoa, don't do this shit on our behalf. You know, we don't need anybody protecting us. We're fine with our culture and we know what we need. It's difficult to get that across to people who aren't suffering themselves. Like, okay, basically, we're all suffering somewhat. We all have a cultural issue to contend with, whatever it might be. Like, maybe we have. I would say our biggest issue is not cultural appropriation, but rather the fact that some other people want to find a culture so bad, and they're so desperate because they don't have one of their own. And so I think of the lonely white guy going to a dead show who sees all these cool people. You know, it's like, wow, they've got dreadlocks and tattoos, and so he gets dreadlocks and tattoos. And then all of a sudden, let's say somebody confronts him, like, oh, you're appropriating this look. And the guy's just like, I'm just trying to figure out who I am. You know, he might not know the history, he might not know the whole story. But I guess that's neither here nor there. Peeps is peeps, right? Fedoras. Well, of course you have, jackass. Hey, Jesse, good to see you. So the point here being, I guess logic doesn't. I think we've gotten past that one. I have heard a lot of stories about how the world oppresses us, and I guess even down to the fact that we know that the government, the way that everything operates, capitalism, works completely against most people. And I remember years ago hearing that the best thing we can do is to use the system to make it work for us, because you're not going to change it. You can be an idealist and you can go out and try to change other people's minds. That's fine. But to step back for a minute in your life and really look at what's going on around you and analyze. And this is hard, harder than it sounds. This is something I've been trying to do for a while here. Analyze what's going on around you. Try to figure out what is the best choice in the environment you have. So, for example, as a metaphor, if you're a soldier and you're out in the battlefield, if you're fighting out in the dunes in Iraq, and you're fighting, it's going to be completely different than if you're in Vietnam in the jungle. The weapons you choose, the methods you choose are going to differ. The camouflage you use is going to differ. All side of God damn it, quit texting me. Um, Let me turn off my ringer here. I have to get somebody to fucking ringing me when I'm like busy. Nobody texts me until I'm on doing some shit. Um, there we go. I think I got it now. Um, the soldier who wears different camouflage. All right, stop texting me, bro. Um, I should have put it on airplane mode, but you see, I can't do that when I'm live casting because airplane mode doesn't work when you're live casting because you need it to cast. I feel like I'm getting too rambly now. It should probably go, unless somebody has a topic they want to ask about, or because I dedicated way too much time and kind of focused a little too much on a debate that didn't really matter. But I like a good debate. I like good discussions. And maybe I'm a little bit already on edge, not edge, but ready to pounce on any discussion about cultural appropriation or bias or hatred or judgment or hate speech because I'm fed up. I'm fed up with the bullshit. I finally got to the point where I can't just ignore it anymore and be like, oh yeah, some people are this way, some people are that way, but really have to defend reality. I don't think that these things are as big of a problem as they're being made out to be. I don't see people around me who are hateful and judgmental. I don't see people as often who are jerks as often as I see people who are generally kind. It's just that it's easier to see the jerks. And now that everybody has a phone, you can record every fucking thing that happens, and you see it all the way. My homie keeps texting me over and over. Quit it, bro. Uh-oh. What happened? Oh. Oh no. I lost my